Have you ever wondered what goes through her mind when she finally realizes you're not coming back, not tomorrow, not next week, not when she's lonely, and not when things stop working out the way she expected? The moment that realization hits, it changes everything. And for many people, that's the moment they never saw coming. Most people think the hardest part of a breakup is the day it happens. They believe the pain is at its peak when the relationship ends, when the final conversation takes place, or when one person decides to walk away. But that's not always true. Sometimes the hardest moment comes much later. Sometimes it arrives quietly, without warning, when the person who left begins to understand that the other person has truly moved on. In the beginning, she doesn't think much about it. Why would she? She's used to hearing from you. She's used to knowing that if she reaches out, you'll probably respond. She's used to your attention being available whenever she wants it. Even after the relationship ends, there's often an assumption that you'll still be there in some form. Maybe you'll send a message, maybe you'll check in, maybe you'll find an excuse to reconnect, maybe you'll keep the door open just in case. That expectation creates a sense of comfort. It allows her to believe that nothing has really changed. Even though the relationship is over, she still feels like she has access to your energy, your affection, and your presence. Deep down, she assumes that if she ever changes her mind, you'll be waiting, but then something unexpected happens. You stop chasing. You stop trying to convince her. You stop looking for reasons to contact her. You stop showing up where she expects you to be. The texts don't come. The emotional conversations disappear. The constant reminders of your existence slowly fade away. At first, she may not even notice. Life is busy. There are distractions. There are friends, work, hobbies, and new experiences competing for attention. But as time passes, something begins to feel different. Days become weeks, weeks become months. And suddenly, the silence starts speaking louder than any words ever could. She notices that you're not reacting to her social media. She notices that you're not finding excuses to stay connected. She notices that you're no longer trying to prove your value or fight for a place in her life. The man she expected to keep pursuing her is nowhere to be found. That's when curiosity starts replacing certainty. Questions begin forming in her mind. What is he doing now? Why hasn't he reached out? Has he really moved on? Does he even think about me anymore? For the first time, she's forced to face something she never had to consider before: the possibility that you may actually be gone. Not because you're angry, not because you're playing games, not because you're trying to make her jealous, but because you've accepted reality and continued living your life. And that's often the moment that creates the deepest emotional impact. People become accustomed to having certain people in their lives. They assume those people will always remain available. They assume access is permanent. When that access disappears, the absence becomes impossible to ignore. The silence she once took for granted now feels different. It feels real. It feels permanent. And with that realization comes a level of reflection that wasn't possible before. Because sometimes people don't fully understand the value of someone's presence until they experience the weight of their absence. And that is where everything begins to change. Once that silence settles in and the reality of your absence starts becoming impossible to ignore, something important begins to happen. The emotional fog that surrounded the breakup slowly starts to clear. What once felt obvious to her may no longer seem so certain. The confidence she had in her decision is now forced to stand on its own without your attention supporting it. And that's where clarity begins. One of the biggest mistakes people make after a breakup is believing that staying constantly available will somehow make the other person appreciate them more. They think that if they keep reaching out, keep explaining themselves, keep proving how much they care, the other person will eventually recognize their value. But in most cases, the opposite happens. Constant availability often prevents someone from experiencing the true consequences of losing you. When you're always there, there is no space for reflection. When you're always texting, there is no room for curiosity. When you're always chasing, there is no opportunity for her to wonder what life actually feels like without you. That's why distance creates something powerful. Distance removes distractions, it removes emotional noise, it forces both people to experience reality exactly as it is. For her, that reality is simple. The relationship is over, and you're no longer filling the role you once did in her life. At first, she may focus on the things that frustrated her. That's natural. Every relationship has disagreements, misunderstandings, and imperfections. When emotions are fresh, people often concentrate on what went wrong. They focus on the reasons they felt unhappy or dissatisfied, but time has a way of changing perspective. As emotions settle, the mind begins looking at the bigger picture. The small annoyances that once seemed significant start losing their importance. The arguments become less vivid. The frustrations become less emotional. What remains are the moments that mattered, the conversations that made her feel understood, the support she received during difficult times, the laughter that came naturally, the comfort of knowing someone genuinely cared. Those memories don't always appear immediately. They emerge gradually as the absence becomes more real. And this is where many people experience a surprising realization. They discover that certain things they took for granted were actually adding tremendous value to their lives. When someone is consistently present, it's easy to overlook what they contribute. Human nature often adapts quickly to good things. We become accustomed to kindness, we become accustomed to loyalty, we become accustomed to emotional support. But once those things disappear, their value becomes easier to see. Your absence creates a contrast that wasn't there before. She can now compare life with you to life without you. She can evaluate what was gained and what was lost. She can see the relationship from a perspective she never had while she was inside it. And the more she realizes that you're not trying to force your way back into her life, the more authentic that clarity becomes. There's no pressure influencing her thoughts, there's no persuasion affecting her judgment. There is only reality. That's why walking away with dignity is so powerful. It isn't about punishment, it isn't about making someone suffer. It isn't about playing psychological games. It's about respecting yourself enough to stop forcing what no longer wants to stay. When you step back, you allow life to become the teacher. You allow reality to speak for itself. And reality often reveals truths that words never could, because sometimes the strongest message you can send is no message at all. And sometimes distance is what finally allows someone to see clearly what they once overlooked. As that clarity continues to grow, another shift begins to happen. Life moves forward as it always does. New experiences appear, new people enter the picture, new conversations take place. On the surface, everything may seem normal. She may stay busy, focus on her goals, spend time with friends, or even explore new romantic possibilities. From the outside, it can look like she has completely moved on, but human emotions are rarely that simple. The truth is that every meaningful relationship leaves behind a standard. Whether people realize it or not, they carry pieces of past experiences into future ones. They compare how they felt, how they were treated, and how deeply they connected. These comparisons aren't always intentional. Sometimes they happen quietly in the background. At first, she may be excited by something new. Newness has a natural appeal. It creates curiosity and anticipation. It feels fresh because it hasn't yet been tested by time. But eventually, the excitement settles and reality takes over. That's when deeper comparisons begin. She starts noticing differences. Maybe someone new can make her laugh, but the conversations don't have the same depth. Maybe someone new is attractive, but the emotional connection feels weaker. Maybe someone new says the right things, but the consistency isn't there. Maybe someone new shows interest, but doesn't make her feel understood in the way you once did. Little by little, memories begin resurfacing, not because she's trying to revisit the past, but because the mind naturally compares experiences when searching for meaning. The things she once overlooked suddenly become more noticeable. She remembers the way you listened when she had a difficult day. She remembers the way you remained calm during stressful moments. She remembers the inside jokes, the shared experiences, and the sense of familiarity that took months or years to build. The reality begins to sink in that meaningful connections aren't easily replaced. Many people assume they can simply find another person and recreate the same bond. But relationships aren't built from appearances alone. They're built through trust, shared memories, emotional investment, and countless moments that happen over time. Those things cannot be duplicated overnight. And that's where regret often begins to appear, not necessarily because she wants the relationship back immediately, but because she's starting to understand the full value of what was lost. Sometimes people don't realize how rare something is until they try to replace it and discover that finding the same qualities isn't as easy as they expected. She may find herself thinking about moments she once dismissed. Conversations she forgot about suddenly become meaningful. Acts of kindness she took for granted start standing out in her memory. The more she experiences life without you, the more she understands what your presence actually contributed. What's interesting is that this process usually happens when you're no longer focused on her. While she's comparing the present to the past, you're continuing your own journey. You're not waiting for validation. You're not monitoring every move she makes. You're not trying to force her realization. You're simply living your life. And that makes the contrast even stronger because while she's looking backward and recognizing what was special, you're moving forward and becoming someone even stronger than before. That's often when the memories become impossible to ignore and the qualities she once considered ordinary begin to feel irreplaceable. While she's looking back and comparing the present to what once existed, something far more important is happening in your life. You're no longer measuring your value through someone else's attention. You're no longer waiting for a text message, a sign, or an opportunity to reconnect. Instead, your focus has shifted towards something that many people neglect after heartbreak. Yourself. This is the point where most people face a choice. One path leads to obsession. It leads to constantly checking social media, replaying old conversations, wondering what the other person is doing, and putting life on hold while waiting for answers that may never come. The other path leads to growth. It's not always the easier path, but it's the one that changes everything. A man who chooses himself after disappointment begins to reclaim the energy he once invested elsewhere. Instead of spending every day thinking about what he lost, he starts thinking about what he can build. He understands that pain can either become a prison or a source of fuel. The decision is his. At first, the progress may seem small. He starts taking better care of his health. He becomes more disciplined with his routine. He spends more time developing skills, pursuing goals, and improving areas of life that were neglected. He begins reading, learning, and challenging himself. Slowly, confidence starts returning. Not the kind of confidence that comes from external validation, but the kind that comes from keeping promises to yourself, the kind that develops when you know you're growing because of your own efforts. This is where a powerful transformation begins. Many people think confidence comes from being chosen by someone else. They believe attraction, approval, or acceptance is what creates self worth. But true confidence is built when you realize your future doesn't depend on another person's decision. When you understand that, everything changes. You stop chasing, you stop forcing, you stop trying to convince people to see your value. Instead, you focus on becoming valuable. And that's a completely different mindset. Ironically, this is often the stage where people who walked away begin noticing the difference. They expected to see someone stuck in the past. They expected to see someone waiting, hoping, and struggling to move forward. Instead, they see someone evolving. They see someone becoming stronger. They see someone who didn't allow rejection to define him. And that can be surprising because many people assume that once they leave, the story stays the same. They assume the person they left behind will remain exactly where they were, but growth changes the story. The man who was once focused entirely on saving the relationship becomes focused on building a better life. His conversations become different. His energy becomes different. His priorities become different. He's no longer operating from fear of loss. He's operating from purpose. That doesn't mean he hates her. It doesn't mean he's trying to prove something. It simply means he understands that life continues and he refuses to waste years waiting for someone to recognize his worth. The most attractive quality any person can develop is a life that moves forward regardless of circumstances. A life driven by purpose, goals, and self respect. Because when someone chooses growth over bitterness, improvement over self pity, and purpose over obsession, they become the kind of person who no longer needs anyone's validation to feel complete. And that's when the transformation becomes impossible to ignore. By this point, something has fundamentally changed. The man she once knew is no longer standing still. He isn't waiting for permission to be happy. He isn't watching the clock, hoping for a message or putting his future on hold. His life has momentum again. His focus is shifted away from what was lost and toward what can still be created. And that's exactly why the next stage often hits harder than anything that came before. For a long time, there may have been an assumption lingering in the background, an unspoken belief that if she ever wanted to reconnect, she could. Not necessarily today or tomorrow, but someday. The possibility remained alive because she imagined you were still emotionally available. She imagined that a door was being held open. Many people never think about how comforting that assumption can be, even after a relationship ends. Some individuals take comfort in knowing that someone still wants them. They may not intend to return, but they like knowing the option exists. It creates a sense of control, it creates a feeling of security. But eventually, reality starts removing that illusion. She notices that your life isn't revolving around the past anymore. She sees that you're creating new experiences. She notices that your energy is no longer directed toward winning her back. You aren't making emotional speeches. You aren't trying to remind her of what you had. You aren't searching for opportunities to reconnect. You're simply living. And that's when the realization begins to take shape, not as a dramatic event, not as a single conversation, but as a gradual understanding that grows stronger with time. She starts recognizing that you're not just taking a break from pursuing her, you're genuinely moving forward. The difference is enormous. Someone taking a break can always return to the same place emotionally. Someone who has moved forward is building a completely new chapter. And that's where reality often hits the hardest. Because now she has to confront something she may have avoided before. The possibility that the version of you who once waited is gone. The possibility that your attention is no longer guaranteed. The possibility that your emotional availability no longer belongs to the past. For many people, this is the moment when the true weight of their choices becomes clear. It's easy to walk away when you believe nothing will change. It's much harder when you realize that life continued without you. She may begin replaying memories differently now. Moments that once seemed ordinary suddenly feel significant. Opportunities that seemed permanent now appear fragile. The certainty she once felt begins to be replaced by questions. What if she underestimated your value? What if she assumed there would always be another chance? What if she didn't fully appreciate what she had when it was right in front of her? Those questions can be difficult because they don't have easy answers. The hardest part isn't necessarily losing someone, the hardest part is realizing that the opportunity to have them may no longer exist. And that's why this stage carries such emotional weight. It's not about jealousy, it's not about revenge, it's not about making someone suffer. It's about the unavoidable reality that every decision has consequences and every opportunity eventually reaches an expiration date. When someone truly understands that you're no longer waiting, that you're no longer defining your future through the past, and that you've accepted life as it is, the situation becomes real in a way it never was before. Because the moment she realizes you're not coming back isn't the moment she loses control over you. It's the moment she realizes she already did. After everything that has happened, after the silence, the reflection, the comparisons, the growth, and the realization, there is one final lesson that matters more than all the others combined. It's the lesson that separates people who remain trapped in the past from those who create a future that is bigger than anything they lost. The truth is, this journey was never supposed to be about making her miss you. It was never supposed to be about proving a point. It was never supposed to be about waiting for the day she finally realizes your value. Those things may happen. She may reflect. She may regret certain choices. She may recognize qualities she once overlooked. But if your entire happiness depends on those outcomes, then you're still giving someone else control over your life. Real growth begins when you stop making another person the center of your story. Think about how many people spend years waiting for closure. They tell themselves they'll finally be happy when they get an apology. They'll finally move on when they receive an explanation. They'll finally feel better when someone comes back and admits they were wrong. But life rarely works that way. Sometimes the apology never comes. Sometimes the explanation never arrives. Sometimes the person never returns. And if your happiness depends on those things happening, you're placing your future in someone else's hands. The strongest people learn a different lesson. They learn that closure is something you create, not something you wait for. They understand that healing doesn't begin when another person changes their mind. Healing begins when you decide that your life deserves your full attention again. That's why the man who truly wins after heartbreak isn't necessarily the one who gets the relationship back. It's the one who gets himself back, the one who rediscovers his purpose, the one who reconnects with his ambitions, the one who develops confidence that doesn't disappear when someone leaves, the one who wakes up every day focused on building a life that excites him. Because when you reach that point, something remarkable happens. The question of whether she comes back starts losing its importance, not because you're bitter, not because you're angry, but because your life is no longer standing still. You're creating opportunities, you're building new experiences, you're meeting new people, you're becoming a stronger, wiser, and more grounded version of yourself. And when that transformation is real, it changes the way you see everything. You stop viewing the breakup as the end of your story. You begin seeing it as the event that forced you to grow, the event that taught you resilience, the event that revealed strengths you never knew you possessed. Many people fear losing someone they love. What they don't realize is that sometimes the greatest loss would be losing themselves in the process. Never make that mistake. Never allow one person's decision to determine your worth. Never allow temporary pain to convince you that your future has been written. Your future is still being created every single day by the choices you make. And the moment you fully understand that, you become free from needing validation, free from needing revenge, free from needing anyone to choose you before you choose yourself. Because at the end of the day, the greatest victory isn't that she realizes what she lost. So you realize how much you gained by finally moving forward,